This show is part of the RetroZap.com podcast network.
Now, prepare yourselves for Starships, Sabers, and Scoundrels Special Edition. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello again, Scoundrels, and welcome to this Scoundrels Special Edition. I'm Dennis Keithly, and with me is my friend and co-host, Jay Krebs. Jay, how are you doing this evening?
Hey, Dennis. I'm doing great tonight, and we got another episode of Resistance. This is the first one from the break, so can't wait to jump in.
Our other friend and co-host, Darth Taxus, is a little under the weather tonight, so he's not going to be able to join us. So, Taxus, get well soon, and you look forward to hearing from him on an upcoming episode of the show. So, Scoundrels, thanks for tuning in. Our Scoundrels Special Editions, if you're not familiar, are bonus episodes of Starships, Sabers, and Scoundrels that don't include our news and other regular segments. Instead, we focus directly on a specific piece of content, an experience, or something else going on in Star Wars. And frequently, the Scoundrels Special Editions feature Jay's That's So Wizard segment, which a new one will be coming up soon. Tonight, as Jay mentioned, we're discussing the mid-season debut of Resistance called Bibo. This is going to be a full spoiler discussion. So, Scoundrels, if you're still here and you haven't seen the episode, you've been warned. You can pause this, go take 22 minutes, catch up, and come back if you want, and we'll wait. But so let's kind of get into this. This is kind of a challenging episode. On episode 72, which is coming up next week, we're going to be getting into the mid-season trailer and some of the details about that. But they kind of led us to believe that, they flat out told us that we were going to be getting into the events of The Force Awakens. And there's been recent coverage from the creators of this show talking about the tone maybe getting more serious and things that there's going to be things that adults were going to find more enjoyable. So I kind of found this episode a little surprising after that mid-season trailer. So you can tune into episode 72 next week and see what we thought about that. But the episode begins with Kaz and Niku visiting Sonara in the salvage yards. She has just returned from a salvage operation with remains of a Z-95 headhunter, and she thinks the parts might be useful to Kaz and Tam and Yeager in repairing the fireball. So right off the bat, we got this nice Clone Wars reference with the Z-95 headhunter. Mm-hmm. What'd you think about that?
Yeah, that piqued my ears up right away because, of course, huge Clone Wars fan right here. Mm-hmm. So I was really excited to get some of that, throwback feeling from the Clone Wars and the little debate that they had back and forth about which model that it was. So that was really nice. Of course, I love Sonara, so it was great to see her right off the bat. So the episode started out great after the break. That was awesome.
Yeah, she was kind of one of the highlights for me for this episode. Mm-hmm. Because right at the she was probably the most complex character in this entire thing. And we'll get to why in just a second. But, she's, like you said, they had that debate about the Z-95, and she said something about being a Z-96, which I had never heard of. I didn't know there was such a thing in Star Wars. So that was a neat little bit. And of course, the Z-95, like you said, it showed up in Clone Wars, and it was also in Han Solo at Star's End, which we covered back in February or March of 2018 in our lead up to.
It's been that long? Wow.
Yeah, as part of our Road to Solo.
Time flies.
Yeah, go back and check that one out, Scoundrels. But in addition to the parts from the fireball, there's a critter stowed away aboard the ship. And although it stinks something awful, Niku falls in love with it, adopts it a pet, and names it Bibo. If you've gone to StarWars.com and check out the episode guide, you can see that this critter is called Rokna, Rokkna. And the neat little fact about this character was that it was voiced by Bob Bergen, who frequently does Luke's voices for video games and such. So, go figure. Okay, this critter shows up a lot, but right off the bat, I was kind of annoyed with it. What did you think?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was one of those things. I was watching this, and of course, Niku is just in love with it. But all I could think of when he was just going goo goo gaga over it was there was I think it was Looney Tunes, where there was a character that said, "I will love him and kiss him,
yes,
and keep him forever, and I will call him George." And that was like, I was so annoyed with that. I'm sorry, but
yeah,
that was the first thing I thought of, and I thought, oh no, where is this episode going? But it's comic relief, so I guess it had its part.
Well, right. Yeah, we'll get a bit more into Bibo here in just a second because he really is the heart of this episode, so to speak. But Kaz attempts to repay Sonara with lunch, but she just simply isn't interested. After Kaz and Niku start to leave, she contacts the pirate Kragan and informs Kragan informs her that her rescues were Resistance pilots. She's got some hold of some footage from the from that ship that they were on when they rescued her, and presumably from the First Order since they're in league with them. And but she doesn't know who they are. She can't tell, and she abruptly ends her communication when Kaz returns. So we'll get back to Sonara in just a bit, but again, I think she was really the most interesting part of this entire episode. A lot of this episode kind of seems, I hate using the term, but just fluff. And that, what was going on with Bibo, I don't know that it really advanced the story too much or the characters a whole lot. But what was going on with Sonara and Kragan, I think will be important to later episodes of Resistance. Yeah,
there was, and again, I'm probably skipping too far ahead, but I think she kind of figures out a little bit, or at least she's got a pretty good idea that Kaz isn't exactly who he says he is.
Yeah,
we'll
definitely.
Get to that scene here.
And what did you make of Kaz approaching Sonara at the lunch? Because he seemed awfully eager to give it to her and to have done something for her. And I can't remember what Niku says, but he's just kind of like, not now, Niku. Like, I kind of got a hint that maybe there was a crush on Kaz's part towards Sonara. Am I alone in that? Or
no, not at all. He had that kind of little awkward way of trying to get himself into her world, I guess you could say, by an offering of food. But yeah, I got that feeling too, that he was kind of crushing on her a little bit.
Yeah, and then that comes up again in just a bit as well. But so let's get back to other parts of the story. Back at Jaeger's garage, Bibo is making a mess of everything and eating a lot of things he shouldn't be doing, including parts of the fireball. Jaeger's had more than enough in order for Niku to get rid of the critter, but instead Niku says, if he's not welcome here, then I'm quitting, and he runs off and promptly loses this critter. I like Niku in small doses, but this was just extremely annoying. And I hate being this harsh on this episode, but again, just coming off of this mid-season trailer, which gave it a completely different tone than what we got in this episode, this was just disappointing, what was going on with Niku and Bibo.
I agree. And exactly, my expectations were so much higher because I know the last time that we had done a Resistance Special Edition, we were all feeling really good about it. Like we were thinking, we've been maybe just a little too hard on this, or maybe we're looking for, a little too much to be good, but it's going somewhere and we think it's going to develop. And then we get this episode. So yeah, I was pretty disappointed too. I'm not going to lie.
Right.
But I was actually surprised that when we were talking about the scene in particular, that Tam stood up for Niku and said, he really doesn't ask for much. At least let him have this. So that really surprised me, as annoyed as she was with the whole thing too.
Yeah, later I want to get into a few of the things that Tam said, because Sonara, I think, was a standout part of this episode, but Tam was a second, I think maybe in second place, but and I'll get into her in just a bit. But so Kaz is accompanying Sonara on a salvage mission, which he was eager to do when Sonara extended the invitation. While they're at sea, Sonara is trying to get information about Kaz, about who he really is and the identity of the pilots that rescued her. And in his usual fashion, Kaz does this whole clumsy, what, secrets? I don't have secrets. What are you talking about? That's absurd. He's the worst at this. I mean, he's not managed to fool anybody. Not Tam, not Tora, and certainly not Sonara here. So, I don't know. He's made strides over the course of the season in being a spy and figuring out how to try and get information. But when he gets confronted with the fact that people think he's up to something, he does a really lousy job covering for it.
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of a combination of him trying to kind of keep his role as a spy sort of under wraps, and the fact that she was kind of flirting with him. I mean, she wasn't, I don't know that she was flirting for the sake of flirting, but I think she picked up on his cues that he was kind of crushing on her. So she was sort of using that to her advantage. So you couple both of those together and the awkwardness of, having those kind of feelings for someone and trying to hide the fact that you're a spy, and you got just a disaster.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I had forgotten about that she definitely was kind of, she amped up the flirting a bit to try and get some information out of him. And to his credit, he didn't spill anything. So, but, while all this is going on, the shadow of a giant sea creature kind of emerges beneath them in the water. And Kaz notices it, and that it is also headed straight for Colossus Station. So they aren't sure what it is, but they determine that they've got to get back there pretty quickly. So meanwhile, back on Colossus, Niku has lost Bibo, but with Tam's help and a tip received by Yeager, they locate Bibo in the engineering section of Colossus Station. Tam had no idea that Niku had these connections into engineering, and when Niku got word that B was in engineering, she's like, "Oh, that narrows it down." It's like, we're just going to go to engineering and find him. And B was like, and Niku's like, "Yeah, no problem." And so they go down there, and we see the Chelday, which are the turtle critters, and then the children from Tar, Kel and Ella, are there, or Isla, I think is what her name is, not Ella. So Isla shares this prophetic dream that she's been having for days now, that something is coming and it's too late. There's nothing that can be done about it. I think she got more dialogue there than she did in the episode Children from Dahar, from which she was introduced. And she was a little creepy.
A little bit. It almost made me think that perhaps she's force sensitive and that she was having visions, because, how else would she really have known any of this? I mean, you can say, oh, it was just a feeling, but that was the first thing that I thought of, because she was, very, like you said, she was kind of very reserved and but she's very intuitive. And so when she said that was the first thing that popped into my head. But her name is too close to Ayla for me, like Ayla Sakura.
Yeah. And honestly, when I was kind of jotting down some notes on this, when I watched the episode, I wrote it down as Ayla because that's what I thought they said. And then later on StarWars.com, I saw that it was this Isla, E-I-L-A is how they pronounce it. Okay. And I think you're spot on with the force sensitivity there. I think that's the conclusion we're supposed to be reaching. And that's intriguing, I think, for the series because, we know that they're refugees from their home planet and that Kylo Ren showed up there and they escaped. And, and then when they did get away, the First Order put this full court press on trying to find them. And it's one thing, I guess, if they were just kids that could potentially spill the beans about what the First Order are doing. But then if they also have some sort of force sensitivity, that would certainly make them a more valuable asset that the First Order would want to get back. So, right. This is kind of where this episode shines with some of these little background details. Again, what's going on with Sonara and her figuring out what's going on with the pirates. I think Kel and Isla's, their appearance here is to set up something that's probably going to happen later in the season, but and then of course we have to see the Chelday again, which I do kind of like them. They're kind of cool. Yeah,
well, I think and maybe like you said, it just kind of put a little thought in my mind because we really haven't gotten anything of the Force at all in Resistance. So I mean, other than just, of course, Kylo Ren and the references there and that type of thing. So maybe this is kind of the breadcrumb trail that's going to lead us to a bigger picture coming up later on. So I'm hoping. I'm hoping.
Yeah, the Force is not awoken yet. So
no, definitely not.
But we're getting there. Well, right on cue, the giant siege creature, which arrives and attacks Colossus Station with its tentacles. We get a scene where it kind of, I don't know, this is not a new story where there is a creature looking for its baby, and I'm just going to blurt it out. That's what's going on here, and it's painfully obvious when you watch the episode that it's there at the station to find Bibo, which is its lost offspring. The only excuse I can give Niku and Tam and Yeager and everyone else that knows about this creature's existence, that they didn't understand that it was related to this giant tentacle creature, is that there's a drastic size difference. But otherwise, it has the same coloring, it has similar appendages, only Bibus are much smaller. They thought that this big Rachna showed up and was because Bibu was its food, and I was like, and I kind of like, come on, that doesn't make a lot of sense. That's not particularly good reasoning that it would go all the way to Colossus Station to find a crumb, as opposed to finding a feast somewhere in the ocean.
And could have eaten anyone on Colossus Station, but obviously was making a beeline.
For this one little thing.
You lied to Bibo.
Right. But putting that aside, Kaz triggers the pirate attack alarm. I mean, it's obvious that this monster's here. Captain Doza launches the aces, and Kaz joins them in the fireball. So, that's kind of a big development for this show, because the fireball flew in the season premiere, the series premiere, but then Kaz crashed it, and ever since then, they've been struggling to keep it together. They've been doing a lot of repairs, but then Kaz took it out too soon, and it kind of malfunctioned once it left the atmosphere. But now it is fully battle ready in this episode, and that kind of arrived without much fanfare.
Yeah, it was kind of glazed over. You're right.
Yeah. And so Captain Doza only authorizes the aces to use blasters because they're too close to the station, and the fear is that if they use missiles, the missiles will go astray and they can cause significant damage to the station. Unfortunately, the blasters are useless against this creature. And so they eventually get the authorization to use missiles. And, eventually Niku is the one that puts two and two together that this Bibo is this creature's baby. And so he runs out onto the station and offers it up, which kind of puts, settles everything. Yeah, I guess I skipped over something that's worth touching on as well. They've been teasing that Sonara might, turn. She may, she's right now a spy for the pirates, but that she's kind of having second thoughts about this, and that she could, she may be contemplating defecting essentially to, I don't know what you call them, but the citizens of Colossus Station. But she's changing sides anyways from the pirates, based on the kindness that so many people have shown her. And when this monster is attacking the station, she could have just let it do damage, but a control malfunctioned that kind of keeps some doors that protects a lot of things from closing, and she ran over there and pulled it open and fixed it. And so I don't know. I think we're kind of getting those teases that there is a allegiance change coming up for her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point.
Mm-hmm. So Kaz tries to make things up with Niku by giving him a pet gourd now that the Bibu's been sent on his way with its mother, father, or whatever it was. But then Niku ends up eating it as a snack instead. So kind of a funny moment. Actually, I guess my favorite moment with Niku from the entire episode. So there you have it. That's kind of this episode in a nutshell. I think for me, the parts that are the best. Okay. Well, I will say this: the Rachna, the monster itself, it looked like a kraken. I thought that was pretty cool. Did a good job designing it. Did you have any particular thoughts on that?
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty original character. I mean, in terms of something we've not really seen before. Mm-hmm. I was a little puzzled that perhaps maybe they hadn't done their research on Colossus Station to know what sorts of sea creatures were possible nemesis, I guess you could say. What is it that we need to look out for? Oh yeah, this big kraken looking thing that could, possibly be very protective of its young. But, I guess in their defense, we don't know everything about our oceans either. We know less about our oceans than we do about space.
Yeah. And I kind of think that impression, pretty much that entire planet is one big ocean. So who knows? I guess there's plenty of room for this thing to hide. I guess the other thing that occurred to me, it's not a replica of the Zilla Beast from the Clone Wars, but I kind of felt like perhaps with those giant tentacles and things that maybe it was inspired a little bit by the Zilla Beast.
Okay. I can see that.
Yeah, so that's kind of a nice reference or callback to the Clone Wars for me, which I liked. Okay, so Tam had a couple lines in this episode that I just loved. First, she was talking to, I think it was Nico, and she says this line, she spits out, "Look, I have a huge problem with vagueness." Which
that was good.
Yeah, when she said that, I paused it and went back 15 seconds just so I could hear her say it again, and that was a good one. And the other one that I liked is when she figured out what Niku was talking about, that Bibo is this offspring of this giant creature attacking the station, she says that cute little disgusting thing grows into that. So, cute little disgusting thing.
Yeah,
that may have been my favorite line about it. But beyond that, again, the reference to the Z95 headhunters was a nice part of this episode. Definitely. I like that they are establishing something with Kel and Isla there. I think that'll come up later. We had Sinara's story in this episode, which, when you sit back and look at this episode, I kind of feel like perhaps Sinara, the children from Tahar, and the Fireball, and Kaz working with the Aces are the things they needed the episode to really accomplish. But it was what kind of story do we put this as do we use as a backdrop for these three things? Mm-hmm. And they came up with the with Bibo, which is fine. It's just the execution of that part of the story was not particularly good, and I think it kind of drags the whole thing down a bit.
Yeah, well, it's kind of, for me, it's kind of equivalent to the Clone Wars episodes with Zero and Cy Snoodles. You know what I mean? There you go. Yeah. And those are the episodes that my husband would look at me and go, Jay, this is really dumb. Why are you watching this? But I stuck it out. I stuck it out. So yeah, that's kind of the feeling that I got from this episode. So
yeah, well, we learned we talked about this last time we covered Resistance, that not a lot of episodes of Rebels that we kind of wrote off as filler and fluff ended up coming back later to. Mm-hmm. Mean something, and who knows, maybe when the First Order is attacking Colossus Station later, or something's going on, that this monster will somehow come and play a role in things. I mean, we just saw what are the whales in Rebels? We wrote them off after a single episode, mm-hmm. and then they were key to the finale of the series. Mm-hmm. So I kind of hope they don't do that, simply because I would like this series to have a bit more of an original element to it than that, but sure. I guess that possibility is out there. Mm-hmm. Do you have any other points you want to raise about this episode before we get to our grades?
Not really. I mean, you did a great job of pointing out all the high points, and pretty much my thoughts on those as well. We're on the same wavelength, so I don't really have much else to say.
Okay, well then, how about a final grade for this one?
Okay, well, I gotta say, I'm really trying with Resistance, and it's kind of sad to me that I have to work so hard to find the things that are the high points, and it's nice to talk to you because it does kind of help me to see a little bit better where some of those tie-ins might be. And like you said, the Clone Wars reference, Sinara, the Children of Tahar, those were definitely the high points. And but it's still, especially for the first episode back, I was just expecting a lot more, to get us propelling towards something. So yeah, not the greatest start for the second half of the season for me. Gosh, I feel horrible. I'm gonna give it a D for me. Well, that's awful, but eesh.
Yeah, no, I understand your feeling on that. I hate being negative about anything when it comes to Star Wars. Mm-hmm. Typically the things that I don't enjoy, I just don't watch. But this series over the course of the season has gotten my hopes up quite a bit. I feel like it had kind of a rough beginning, and then it improved over the first half of the season. And I don't know, maybe if we just hadn't had the trailer, again, tune into episode 72 coming up next week, Scoundrels, then my expectations would have been elsewhere for this episode. Mm-hmm. I think the things that, you just reiterated there, that this episode needed to do, it did those things well, but the story that they used as the backdrop with this creature, it needed some serious polish. It needed a little less Niku craziness, a little less over the top Niku, and it could have been a great story, but this one, for me, it's a C, and I think if it didn't have those other connective parts, then I probably would have given it a D as well. But the high points pulled it up to a C for me. So not our favorite, but that's okay. So we will move on to the next episode and hope that we get back into the the schemes of the First Order and what Kaz and company are going to do to resist them. So anyway,
fingers crossed.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for our discussion of Bibo. Before you go, do you have anything coming up that our Scoundrels can look forward to?
Just right here on Starships, Sabers, and Scoundrels. This is my main focus right now. You can always find my blogs over on Coffee with Kenobi and my Core Worlds Couture fashion review blogs as well. On a hiatus right now, and we'll kind of see where that goes. And you have to tune into the next That's So Wizard Special Edition to find out some more about some of the upcoming fashion and product news in the Star Wars galaxy.
All right. Well, Darth Taxus, our absent host, you can find him over on the Geek Supreme each week with Scott Murray, Jeff McGee, and Regina Davis with their Around the Horn style geek topic discussion show. It's easier to write than it is to say. As for me, you can always find my comic reviews over on RetroZappers.com. And each month I'm talking Star Wars comics with Jovial J. Shepard on Jedi Journals. With the return of Star Trek Discovery, my wife Beth and I will be reviving Warp Trails and covering each episode on the RetroZap feed, so you can be looking for that soon. And I was a last-second fill-in co-host on Coffee with Kenobi this week, so you can be looking for that episode. It should be out about the same time this is.
Awesome.
Yeah, if you want to find us on social media, we are at SQPod on Twitter and Instagram, and on Facebook at facebook.com/SQPod. You can email us at sqpod@retrozap.com. You can follow Darth Taxus on Twitter at Darth Taxus. Jay is at Joyce Krebs, and I am at DJKVER2. Speaking of RetroZap, we are a proud part of the RetroZap.com podcast network. The network currently features more than a dozen shows covering everything from retro gaming and movies to the Animaniacs, collecting, Dune, Game of Thrones, and of course, a ton of Star Wars. You can subscribe to the network feed to get them all. And speaking of RetroZap, currently looking for new writers and podcasters. So if you have any interest, head over to RetroZap.com and you can find a link that'll tell you what you need to do to apply and make your pitches to Joe Tavano, the editor-in-chief and owner of the site. So that's going to do it for this edition. For this Scoundrels Special Edition of Starships, Sabers, and Scoundrels. We'll talk to you all soon with another edition of the show. Until then, may the Force be with you.